I'm Rosalind Levitt, and I live at the Mayflower, which is a retirement community, and I enjoy living here very much. Well, I was born in New York City, in the Bronx. In those days, the Bronx was a very respectable place to live. I had two older brothers, and then I had an older cousin who lived with us. We lived a very pleasant life. We were not very well-to-do. Jack was the only one that had a car, so the others had to go where he went. And we got to talking to each other. The next night he came again, and that was just the beginning of it. Somehow or other I knew he was the right person for me, and I was the right person for him. And it was that way for 57 years. My brother-in-law, his brother, went on a vacation in Miami Beach and met a fast-talking lawyer there who sold him a ladies' dress shop in Orlando, Florida. So he came back to Hanover and asked us if we would go down to Orlando for 2 or 3 weeks. We left out of Baltimore in the middle of a sleet storm. 22 hours later, we got off the train. The sky was blue, the sun was shining, the azaleas were in bloom, and you could smell orange blossoms all over the place. We thought we died and went to heaven. And the Jewish community was so wonderful to us. And I just loved living here. I'm blessed with a wonderful family. I am so proud of my children, my grandchildren, and even my little great-grandchildren. I didn't mind so much becoming a great-grandmother, but I sure hated the idea of being the mother of a grandfather. Reading is the one thing that I did by myself. Subsequently, because my husband had an artistic bent, we did pottery, stained glass. We did a lot of traveling. That didn't stop even after my husband passed away. I was sitting at dinner at the Mayflower, and one of the women there said she'd love to go to Antarctica. If she could go to Antarctica, she could say she's been on all 7 continents. Well, I got it counted up in my head. I'd been to 6 continents too. And she says, but who would go to Antarctica with me? I said, I will. And we did. And we had a marvelous time there. I always liked cats. I had this collection long before I had a real cat. Well, my cat is a calico, and she's called Pretty Kitty. Pretty Kitty? Yes, come on over here. Well, I've been very, very fortunate. I've had a very good life. I'm sorry that I lost my husband as early as I did, 19 years ago. I miss him to this very day. Being among other people like this has really done a lot to keep me young. Today is gone in 24 hours, but there's a whole world ahead of you. Be kind, be nice, then you'll be happy.
My name is Charles Shulman. I'm 86 years old. I have lived in Florida for going on 60 years. Came in 1958. And so far, so good. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I was the youngest of 4 boys. I had an oldest brother, Bernard, and then there were twin brothers, Ed and Frank, and then I'm the baby. Unfortunately, everybody is gone. I was born in 1931, which was in the middle of the Depression, and it was a tough time. I had a very happy childhood. I had loving parents and brothers who didn't beat me up too much. I studied electrical engineering, and that's what I've been all my life. When I was in Vanderbilt, there were two Jewish fraternities, ZBT and AEPI. So I went to a dance there one night, and there was Edith. Now, I think I was either a sophomore or a junior. Edith was a senior in high school. There weren't enough Jewish girls in Vanderbilt to make a decent dance, so they invited high school girls. But I do know that I never dated another girl after that. We've been married 63 years. The Martin Company, now Lockheed Martin, had just opened the plant here in Orlando. Came here for an interview and eventually came to work here until 1993, which about 34 and a half years. So I have worked and I've been retired, and I can tell you retirement is better. The only problem about retirement is that there's not enough time to do everything that you want to do. We all hope that tomorrow is going to come and that it's going to be a good day, but it may not. I think the key to happiness is try not to sweat the small stuff. The biggest adventure was being in the Navy. I didn't particularly care for being in the Navy, but one of my brothers, Frank, who was also in the Navy, said, I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience, and I wouldn't do it again for $1 million. To stay mentally young, I try, honestly, to always have a young attitude. Our daughter, Karen, was very interested in running. So we did a half marathon with her and became very interested in it. And I did a total of, I think, 18 half marathons. I like to work on the computer. My son, Mark, our son, Mark, said I was the best programmer he ever saw who didn't do it for a living. So that was quite a compliment. My son is my greatest friend now, and I mean that. He has turned out, I couldn't be prouder of how he's turned out, both he and Karen.
My name is Lillian Berkowitz, and I'm a New Yorker, as you can tell by my accent. Most people know that right away. And I've been here in Florida for 20 years. I moved here because my daughter, who was married, was having a baby, and my other grandsons and granddaughter lived in California. And I didn't want long-distance grandchildren again, so we moved to Florida. I never thought I would move to Florida, but when your children move to Florida, you begin to like it very much. Then my husband and I moved here to the village on the Green, and we're very happy here. My husband and I loved Florida. Unfortunately, he died in 2009. I do a lot of work at the JCC, and one of my friends and I are co-chairman of the senior group there called the 39ers, named after Jack Benny, whose age was always 39. He never grew older. My sister was an artist. She wanted to go to Europe after she graduated from college, and my mother was not about to let her go to Europe on her own. So she talked me into going to Europe with her. We loved each other, but we were different. We went to Europe with enough money to stay for 3 months. And the money that we went to Europe with stretched. We stayed for 1.5 years, and we brought back a lot of art. Every day we said, we'll divide up the money, you go your way, I'll go my way, but we never did. We stayed together the whole time. And unfortunately, my sister passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 82. And as much as we didn't get along, we loved each other. After 1.5 years, we knew it was time to go home. So we booked passage on a ship. And I remained single until one day, along come these 3 young men that we don't know. It turned out that we got to know them, and I married one of them. They were looking for a cheap weekend, and so he found a cheap weekend, but it wound up very expensive for him. One of the reasons that my husband and I got together and met and stayed is he had just come home from the Army. And so when we were together and he would tell me where he had gone, I said to him, I was there too. And I think I was an enigma to him, because he never met a girl who had been to all the places he was. He went courtesy of the Army, and I went courtesy of my father. Years ago, I used to do a lot of knitting, and then I did needlepoint, as you can see. I'm a bridge player. Second, I shouldn't call him husband, because we were not married, but he was like a husband to me. And when we were together, we would play bridge 5 times a week. Family is very important, because you have to have someone that you're close with, that you can talk to. You have to be flexible and let your children do things and have their own experiences.
My first name, most people call me Gerald, but that's not my name. My real name is Gerald, and people that know me well call me Gerald. But I always wanted a sexy name. How sexy is Gerald? So I go up to the hotel there in France and I check in, and the woman looks at me and she says, "Nom, please." And I said, "Robinson." She runs her finger down the list and she says, "Gerald?" I said, "Honey, that's me. That's been me for many years." I'm full of it. I'm a West Virginia hillbilly, and I started with my dad when I was 13 years of age, working in his garage. And that resulted in me owning a car in NASCAR, number 99, which today is owned by Home Depot. As soon as we found out you had to win a lot of races to get the money to race with, we quit racing. But then my son, he became seriously ill. So we took him to several physicians, and they all said the same thing: you've got to get him out of there. There's too much coal dust and smoke in the air. So we moved to Florida on a trial basis for 6 months, and in 6 months, he gained a lot of weight. He's been well for the rest of his life. He started preaching at age 16. I've got 2 sons. One of them's with State Farm Insurance, and he sells fire insurance as a homeowner's policy. So you've got 2 people, one selling fire insurance and the other one selling fire insurance, but it's 2 different kinds of insurance. When we moved to Florida, I had to have a job, so I went to work with State Farm Insurance companies. And on my application, they tell me, I wrote down, it says, "What's your goal with State Farm?" And I said, "To be a vice president." And lo and behold, I became the vice president of agency for State Farm Insurance Company, a job I held for 14 years. I never would have left it voluntarily. But my wife became terminally ill with cancer. And so I said, whatever time she's got left, we're going to enjoy it. You can't look around the corner and see what's going to happen tomorrow. You have to live each day as it comes up. Betty passed away, and I thought that was the end of the world. A few years later, I met a lady, and we began dating, and the next thing you know, I decided, hey, I'm going to ask this lady to marry me. And of course, my mother was a major female influence in my life, because she taught us to be courteous to older people. I have a problem with that today, because I don't find many people older than I am. So I still try to be courteous. I always told Peggy, I'm not going to get old. That's a destination. I'm going to get older. That's an activity. As long as it's an activity, I can handle it. But God's not through with us yet. Whatever volunteers He needs, that's where we'll be. God knows everything. God's got the answer. You get down on your knees and talk to God, and you'll get better advice than I can give you.
My name is Doris Gilbert. I am a very active senior. I do a lot of volunteer work. I also do a lot of writing, which I discovered in later life. I am a writer, and that amazed me. I grew up in Brooklyn, and all my schooling was in Brooklyn, and even the college was Brooklyn College. My parents were very hardworking people. My father was a tailor, and my mother was a homemaker, but she was also a dressmaker. So I had lovely clothes even though we were poor. I never knew I was poor, but I always had nice clothes. Oh, I met my husband all through high school and college. I was working part-time in a department store. Well, he was on the executive training squad, and that's how we met. And he was the one who said to me, "Why are you here? Go into teaching, get out of this rat race." And I took his advice, and then I began to teach. It was lovely. I just loved the way he looked and spoke, and he was very intelligent. He had a good sense of humor, which is important to me. I came to Florida because of my husband's ill health. And so we were housebound for 12 years, but I made lemonade out of lemons. I always went to a doctor at noon for an appointment so that we could have lunch out. And so it was always a positive experience. Well, my hobbies are, of course, writing. I was a master gardener. Oh, the stained glass, when I came here, somebody was offering this class. And stained glass is wonderful but difficult. And I called it a religious experience because every time you worked, you cut your hand. You were bleeding all the time. And she didn't want us to use patterns. She wanted it to be creative. And then I was a volunteer at the cancer center. And since I had breast cancer myself, most of the people who worked there were volunteers, had cancer. It was kind of paying back. We took a course in boating, my husband and I, and we loved it. We had a houseboat. That was the last boat, and we were caught in a hurricane. And that made the cover of the North Carolina paper. And I said, please don't let this go to New York. If my mother knew, she would never, she wouldn't rest. I'm still, for my 90th birthday, my sister-in-law said, what do you want? You're gonna laugh. I said, a dictionary, a good dictionary. So she got me a good dictionary. I'm still looking up words. I think what keeps me young is having a sense of humor. Laugh at yourself. I laugh at myself all the time. If I'm with my walker, I'll say, I'm on a line, I'll say, please let the cripple through. I think all my friends always tell me I have a wonderful sense of humor. That's a big joke, when I sign my name, I say, how do you spell her name, Marilyn Monroe? So that's just a big joke. The most important thing I've learned is to care about other people. And it's wonderful to be with other seniors because we grew up in the same generation and we laugh at the same things, talk about the same things, and that's important. We have that commonality. It's important.
My name is Eva London-Ritt, and I was born in Hamburg, Germany in 1933 and escaped the Holocaust, leaving in May 1940. I've lived in Orlando since 1972 and moved here with my late husband David Elliott Ritt and 3 children, Simon, Linda, and Michael, and have been very active in the Jewish community and hope to continue to do it for many more years. My parents, especially my father's family, had lived in Hamburg for hundreds of years. And my brother attended the Talmud Torah school, which during the Kristallnacht was attacked, and the synagogue next to it was bombed, and all the Jewish children had to go to one school. And we were lucky that we left in around May 15th in 1940, because the startup roundup of Jews began in May 20th, 1940. And I became a registered nurse in 1954. During that time, while I was in training, I went on a holiday with my aunt, who had survived the war. And there's where I met David Elliott Ritt, my dear husband, who sadly passed away 5 years ago. Well, I don't know if you can call collecting elephants a hobby, but I do love elephants, and I have a few, not live ones, around my home. And I love reading. I'm doing a little bit of writing. I want to write my life story, and I've got one page done, so that's the beginning. Take each day as it comes, and to enjoy what you have, and what you don't have is too bad, you know. About 4 or 5 years ago, I, with 3 other women, started a group called the Zionistas, and this was Christian and Jewish women united to support Israel. Just like I said, I miss my David very much, but you know, life goes on, and there isn't a day I don't think about him. All my children, Simon, Linda, and Michael, were born in Ottawa. I have 7 grandchildren. I don't know, I enjoy life. I don't dwell on things that you can't do anything about. I think positive. Biggest adventure in life was marrying my husband. But I think one of the things, the first time I went to Israel, and it was just a fantastic experience. I mean, that was really a life experience, something that I'll never forget. But to me, one of the most important things in life is kindness. And by kindness, you can change so many things.
Well, my name is Betty Ann Fleetlighter, and I'm going to be 86 December 27. So I'm a Capricorn. I'm a happy person. I was born in Tallahassee, Florida, so I'm a true native Floridian, and I attended college at the University of Florida and met my future husband there. We were married in 1951. He ended up going to the University of Miami Medical School. We were married 12 years before he completed everything. We had moved 12 times, but we managed to have 3 daughters in the meantime. We then moved to Daytona Beach, where he practiced cardiology for 35 years. It was a wonderful experience, and we really enjoyed living in Daytona Beach. Unfortunately, at the age of 68, he had a massive heart attack. It was a rare type of heart attack, and he passed away at Shands Hospital. I waited about a year, and I moved to Orlando, and I've never regretted the move. I decided to go back to school myself to take interior design. I've always loved interior design. And I love shoes too, but I think I'm like both of them equally as well. The shoes, I'm addicted. I can't wear the high heels anymore, but I have a lot of flats. It's a good thing it's not chocolate, because I love chocolate too, and it wouldn't last. From the time we got married until I moved here, I was president of 7 different organizations. When I became president of Temple Israel, I was the first woman to be president of our synagogue because we are conservative. So that was something I treated with great honor. Decided it was time to move on, and I came to Orlando. I have always tried to be there when in need. It makes me feel good to know that I've made somebody else feel good. I think I learned that from my parents, and my brother Leonard is the same way. My 3 daughters are my best friends. They have made wonderful choices, and of course my grandchildren, and now my 3 great-grandchildren. So what more could I ask for? We shouldn't expect things right away, instant gratification. And my grandma Fleet used to say, patience should not take a vacation. And I thought I've always lived with that. When my husband passed away and everybody left, and I was home, and I walked outside and I said, my goodness, the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, the flowers are blooming, cars are passing by, and life is going on, and I knew I had to do that too. Most of all, my motto has always been to make life happen. I think that's very, very important. You have to make life happen.
My name's Dick Weiner. Full name is really Irving Richard Weiner, and though I go by my middle name. And I've lived here in Central Florida in Orlando practically my whole life, from the time I was about 6 months old. When we came down here, my granddad had one of the first delicatessens, which was located on Church Street, where Church Street Station now is. And so the historic district was a little bit different in those days, which was the late 30s, early 40s. And at the University of Florida, I was a ag economics major. Florida was what we called a land grant school, so we all had to go through ROTC, feeling 2 things. One, that we all owe something back to our country, and one was to go into the service, and certainly it made a whole lot more sense to go in as an officer. So on graduation, was commissioned as second lieutenant, and my branch was in the infantry. Now, the best thing that ever happened to me, though, was in my senior year. I met my wife, Louise, and we met, got pinned, engaged, and married in 4 months. That, as I say, was the best decision, the best thing that ever happened to me. And as we have gone along, we are still enjoying every day just as we started back then. And I call myself the luckiest guy in the world. It all starts with Louise. We have 3 sons, David, Alan, and Ben. Have 6 grandchildren. My initial involvement in the Jewish community really was probably more focused on Israel and fundraising for Israel. But I had probably held every office as a relatively young person. Also was president of the council at one point. I spent 47 years effectively with the same investment firm. In retiring, one of my goals was to lead as stressless a life as I possibly can and play about as much tennis as I could. And though I backed off a little bit, I still play probably 3 or 4 times a week, and we don't ever use the word old. The primary hobbies are photography and tennis. Treat your kids with respect. Have them respect other people. When children live with love, they learn to love. The book that I am the ultimate authority on, and it's a book that needs to be written, and the book will be a book on procrastination. And as soon as I can get around to it, I'm going to write that book.